Imagine waking up every day in a small cage, knowing your every move is watched, your freedom is non-existent, and the only time you get to feel the wind in your fur is when you're being paraded in front of an audience, all eyes on you. Now imagine that, but you're a tiger. Sounds like a nightmare, right? Yet, this is the life of so many animals in circuses, especially tigers. But have you ever wondered, how does it feel to be born a circus tiger? Is it as miserable as we think, or is there more to the story? Before we get into the gritty details, let's just take a moment to think about it. You're born with the body of a mighty predator, the king of the jungle, but instead of running free in the wild, you're trapped in a cage, showing off your every move to an audience, doing tricks for food. Yikes, that doesn't sound like the dream life, does it? But here's where it gets interesting. As a human, we often think we understand what animals go through based on our own experiences, right? But have you ever stopped to consider that maybe, just maybe, these tigers might have a perspective we completely overlook? Is it all that bad? Or could there be some bizarre perks to being a circus tiger? Let's break it down and find out. But hold on. What if being a caged tiger isn't as terrible as we think? What if there's a twist to this story that no one is talking about? Keep watching. You won't want to miss this. Let's start with the basics. Life in a circus isn't exactly a day at the zoo. For these tigers, it's more like living in a tiny, cramped apartment, except instead of Netflix, they get to perform tricks like jumping through hoops and standing on pedestals. Now, you might be thinking, well, at least they get food, right? Yes, but it's not just any food. It's food they've earned through performing tricks. Imagine if every time you had to eat, you had to do a backflip. Wouldn't that be exhausting? And don't even get me started on the mental toll. Tigers, like many animals, are extremely intelligent. Being stuck in a cage with nothing to do all day, only to perform on command, it's like being trapped in a never-ending cycle of monotony, doing the same thing over and over, with no escape. You know, kind of like those days when you have a ton of meetings back to back, and you feel like your brain is melting? Imagine that for your whole life. Not fun. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. What if this same routine could somehow, and I mean somehow, be a little less soul-crushing? Could there be a way these tigers actually find some comfort in their odd, repetitive lives? Sounds impossible, right? Keep watching because this might just blow your mind. Let's talk psychology for a second. You see, animals, especially intelligent ones like tigers, actually have a capacity for what's known as learned helplessness. This means that after a certain amount of time, they can begin to believe there's nothing they can do to escape their situation. So they stop trying altogether. Essentially, they've given up hope. Now, before you start feeling like a complete villain for supporting circuses, and trust me, I know the guilt you might be feeling. Consider this. It's not just about the cruelty of confinement. It's also about the intense psychological toll it takes. Imagine living your life with no control over anything, no choices, no freedom. It's like being in a constant state of survival mode. But wait, is it possible that some of these tigers have just accepted their lives in the circus? Almost like we might accept our job situations we're not totally thrilled about? You know, that feeling when you hate your job, but somehow you just get used to it. And before you know it, you're just going through the motions? What's fascinating is that tigers might have an even greater capacity for coping with this life than we give them credit for. But is that truly okay? Just because they adapt doesn't mean they're thriving. And then there's the most surprising twist of all. What if there's a secret side to these circus tigers we never see? Is it possible that they actually enjoy parts of their life? Stick with me, because the truth might be more complex than you think. Let's step outside the circus for a moment and look at what the rest of the world thinks. Circuses have long been controversial, especially when it comes to animal rights. PETA and other organizations argue that it's inhumane to keep tigers, elephants, and other animals in captivity for the sake of entertainment. And honestly, they've got a point. The ethical question here is obvious. Can we justify the use of animals in circuses when their natural instincts and behaviors are so suppressed? Yet, in some places, these animals are considered a commodity. Some argue that circuses provide a level of care and protection that wild tigers might not receive. And that's the thing, it's a complicated issue. It's not as black and white as it seems. Maybe we can't judge a tiger's life in a circus by human standards. After all, would you rather be born into a circus or face the constant threat of poachers and a shrinking natural habitat in the wild? But wait, could there be something deeper here that challenges what we think we know about the wild life versus captivity? What if there's a third option you never even considered? A life that's not in the wild, but not in a cage either? What would that mean for these tigers? Could they have a better, more fulfilling life somewhere in between? Think about that, because we're about to dive into something that could change how you see circuses forever. Believe it or not, there may be some perks to being a circus tiger. Sure, it's hard to imagine, but let's break it down. For one, these tigers are often cared for in ways that tigers in the wild could never dream of. They get regular food, medical care, and believe it or not, some level of comfort. In the wild, food isn't guaranteed. Tigers have to fight to survive, while circus tigers get a pretty reliable meal. So, maybe just maybe there's a tiny silver lining to their caged existence. And here's another thought. While they're in the circus, they don't have to worry about the dangers that come with being wild. No predators to worry about, no hunting accidents, no diseases lurking in the shadows. Could this mean that circus life, as strange as it is, might actually be safer than their wild counterparts? But hold on, that doesn't mean this life is good or ideal. It just might be less bad than we thought. So, are we really doing these animals a favor by keeping them in captivity? Is it possible that we humans have created a lesser evil situation for them? And here's the most mind-blowing question of all. If these tigers are actually surviving in the circus, does that mean they've found meaning in their situation? Could they, in some strange, weird way, be happy? Hold that thought. When you really think about it, the story of circus tigers is far more complicated than we might like to admit. There's no simple answer. Sure, it's heartbreaking to think about their captivity, but it's also possible that they've learned to adapt and even find some comfort in it. But we can't ignore the fact that their lives are a shadow of what they could have been in the wild. And this is where you come in. What's the real answer here? Is it about helping animals find freedom in sanctuaries? Is it about finding a balance between human entertainment and animal welfare? Or is it something else entirely? A world where tigers and other animals truly thrive on their own terms. So the next time you see a tiger in a circus, ask yourself, are they truly free? And if not, what are we willing to do about it?